Want to go right to the great Michael Knowles, host of the Michael Knowles Show on the Daily Wire. Michael, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me.
I got to tell you, this special here is mostly inspired by your debate that I watched the other day with Alex O'Connor. Tell us about this cat. And it was a 90-minute conversation. It's called, Is America a Christian Nation? So obviously, wonderful topic, important topic. Who's Alex O'Connor? And tell us your big takeaway from this conversation.
Alex O'Connor is a prominent liberal on YouTube, pretty educated, posh, and articulate chap. He's from, the old motherland across the sea. And so we needed a translator, obviously, to get between his broken English and my proper American English. But I met him in an odd way, which is that I met him when I was asked to host a short little special on the traditional Latin Mass. You don't usually meet atheists when you're doing films about the Latin Mass. But he came in, he's a pretty open-minded guy. And so he, unlike some of the prominent atheists that have cropped up in recent decades, he seems at least relatively knowledgeable about faith and about Christianity in particular, and open to discussing in a spirit, not merely of trying to land zingers, but actually ascertain some aspect of truth. So, those are all the nice things I'll ever say about him, and then I can go back to dunking on his crazy views. But it was quite enjoyable to sit down with him because, it's a rare debate these days where your opponent is actually listening to what you have to say.
Yeah, and that definitely comes across throughout the whole 90 minutes. What was there any argument that he made? Again, the question was, is America a Christian nation? And I think it was more like, was America founded as a Christian nation? It was less of an assessment of what we are right now, because who knows what pagan religion we are now. But was there any argument he brought up that you've never thought of or that you thought was interesting?
No, not in particular, but I was glad we had the opportunity to hash it out. And in part, this is really two reasons. One, I wrote a book called Speechless, Controlling Words, Controlling Minds. It was about how norms and standards and taboos have changed throughout the course of American history. So, I've focused on this pretty intensely, the degree to which America is a Christian country, what it means for America to be a Christian country, where secularism comes from, why people mistakenly today believe we have a firm separation of church and state and a secular or liberal nation. And so I've just spent a lot of time professionally working on this. So he didn't present any arguments that I hadn't heard before. But the other reason that I had considered his point of view is, one, I was an atheist for 10 years. I was never a liberal, but I was a libertarian. So, about halfway there. But three, because I mentioned the Latin Mass earlier, because I'm a mackerel-snapping papist of the old Catholic religion, I think I have a little bit of a remove and even perhaps a more indifferent perspective on the place of religion in America, because America was not founded exactly to be a Catholic country. So, that just gives you a little bit of remove, I guess, from some of the sectarian battles that took place in the early country. Some of my ancestors came over on the Mayflower. They were extraordinarily zealous Calvinist separatists from the Church of England, and they all kind of fought among each other. And, you see this throughout the early colonies. And then as the American Revolution came about, you see the rise of Enlightenment deism and a little bit more of, shall we say, liberal religion, but nothing like the modern left would have you believe. And these men, who founded our country were heterodox in many ways from the perspective of Christianity, and yet they understood something that their modern counterparts don't, which is that without a Christian morality, to use John Adams's phrase, without the religion, the Christian religion of our forebears, to use the phrase of John Jay, you could go on down a litany of founding fathers and framers of the Constitution. Without that, the country would not be able to sustain itself. There's that famous line from Benjamin Franklin, who says after the Constitutional Convention, "We've given you a republic if you can keep it." And what he means by that is that republics are vulnerable. They're fragile things if the people do not comport themselves with virtue and religion and morality. And so today we've thrown that part out now, and that's probably why we haven't been able to keep it very well in recent years.
What, in your experience, personal or speaking to the Alex O'Connors of the world, what do you think is a good argument for how we weren't a Christian nation? I find this question to be one of the most obvious questions. I should say I don't know a good counter to it, and that frustrates me a bit, that we're still having this debate when it's so obvious that we were. Like, if nothing else, we weren't a Muslim nation, we weren't a Buddhist nation. So if we were not a Christian nation, what other nation were we possibly?
Right. Well, when you point this out to them, that can sometimes lead you to a more edifying place, which is they'll say, we're not a Christian nation. And the reason we're not a Christian nation is because John Adams signed the Treaty of Tripoli, which was negotiated by a Jeffersonian diplomat, by the way. And the Treaty of Tripoli says that America is not founded on the Christian religion. Now, that part is true. President Adams did sign that. President Adams, who also said that America is founded on a Christian morality and necessarily must be. So how do you make sense of that contradiction? Well, you have to recognize that the Treaty of Tripoli is not the Constitution. It's not Federalist Papers. It's not the essays and missives surrounding the founding of the country. It's not even a personal diary or personal letters. It was an instrument of diplomacy to stop Muslim pirates from capturing our sailors and enslaving. That's really all it was. And it was negotiated by a Jeffersonian diplomat. That tells you something too, which is that Thomas Jefferson was one of the more liberal and perhaps secularly inclined of the founding fathers. And he did use that phrase in a private letter. He said that there ought to be a firm separation of church and state. But Thomas Jefferson said all sorts of crazy things, and I don't mean to besmirch the man's honor. He was also very intelligent and made a lot of great contributions, but he's just wrong about that. There simply is not in our Constitution or in our founding statutes any separation of church and state. And so then the proof of that is just in American history. At the time of the ratification of the Constitution, there were established churches in multiple states. The reason why the First Amendment does not establish a church at the national level, among other reasons, is that there were already established churches at the state level, and those persisted for decades, in some cases, after the Constitution. Obviously, the Mayflower, was filled with pilgrims who were rather religiously zealous. You see this in the early colonial statutes that would punish all sorts of crimes from a directly religious lens. And to that point, we've had blasphemy laws on the books in America for all of American history. We still have some blasphemy laws on the books, and they were enforced until somewhat recently. And then this ties in with other aspects of the law. We still, in principle, could punish obscenity. Why do we punish obscenity? Do we do it on the grounds of some kind of secular, liberal, or libertarian enlightenment view? No, we do it because it's wrong, and obscene things are contrary to human flourishing and contrary to the laws that are given to us in part by revelation and from God. We were imprisoning pornographers at the federal level as recently as 2008, as recently as the year that Barack Obama got elected. So, we don't even have to go all the way back to ancient American history. In fact, all you have to do is reach into your pocket, pull out a coin or a currency, if you still carry physical currency. I guess the liberals want to get rid of that too. But look at what it says right there on the currency. It says, what? In Joe Biden we trust? Does it say in abstract reason we trust? No. 3 letters. It says in God we trust.
One of the points you've made that influenced my political thinking more than anything else you said, many years ago, I heard you, someone made the argument to you that you can't legislate morality. I've heard that line a billion times. And you're like, no, like that's all we do. Like, that's like all laws legislate morality. Quite the opposite of what, you can't legislate morality. We only got about like 2 minutes or so. Let me throw this your way. And I love watching you on, the Whatever podcasts and talking to all these other people. What has been the fruit of our separation of church and state over all these last, 60 years or so? What have we seen now that we're no longer a Christian nation? What do you see around you and the people that you talk to and how they live their life and the culture we've created that we've gotten away from our founding?
Well, you see that as we have attempted to supplant the Christian religion that the country is founded upon, we have replaced it with an anti-religion. And we see this religion through rituals, through a new liturgical calendar, through new forms of sacrament. You've just left the month of Pride. Christians call it the month of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, but liberals call it the month of Pride. Pride being the queen of all vice, and as my colleague Andrew Clavin says, the vice of all queens now. and the deadliest of the 7 deadly sins. We have that liturgical calendar. We have these new rituals, and we do have the new sacraments. You know, in Christianity, we see baptism as a real sacrament, God acting on us, give us a new birth, you know, a man to be born again. Well, the liberals have that too. This is the one expression of this is the transgender transition, which is referred to as a new kind of life, a ritual suicide, I guess you'd say. The old self is then referred to as a dead name. And you have this new self that apparently is disconnected from that. So you can't avoid sacrament. You can't avoid sacrament because human beings, unlike any other creature, are body and soul together. We've got one foot in the spirit world. We got one foot in the world of the beasts and the lower animals. And so we recognize that there is a distinction between these things. We have to touch the eternal. We're sensual creatures. We communicate through signs and symbols. That's why we have flag. We used to have an American flag. Now we have a pride flag. We used to venerate icons of our Lord. Now we venerate icons of, I don't know, George Floyd or something like that. You can't escape morality because, as you just pointed out, the law is applied morality. That's where it comes from. And applied morality comes from broader morality, and that comes from an understanding of anthropology, human nature, comes from an understanding of epistemology, how we come to know things. It comes from an understanding of ontology, what being even is, what it even means to exist. And ultimately, the liberals are going to hate this, the secularists are going to hate this. That comes down to theology, which is, what is the created world? What is, you know, what is the highest good? What is the source and summit of all being? You can't avoid giving an answer to that. And if you give an unwitting answer, you're gonna live in the anti-religion that's caused so much harm to our country today.
That's it. If you yourself don't think about these things and answer them yourselves, you'll let the culture answer them for you, and we know where the culture is right now. Michael Knowles, super grateful for you, man. I don't know if there's anyone out there who speaks outside of the bubble, outside of the choir more than you, and I'm super grateful you're doing it. Keep up the great work.